Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of College and Career Pathways, where every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we provide you with information on various colleges, universities, financial aid resources, skilled trade professions, technical schools, training opportunities, and career readiness skills, all designed to help you make the best career decisions possible. I'm Toni Cureton, your host, and today we are with the Michigan Department of Treasury, and they are here to talk about the various financial aid opportunities that you have available to you here in Michigan. Welcome back, Felicia. We're so glad to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be back. My name is Felicia Pelto. I come from the Michigan Department of Treasury, also known as My Student Aid. And I'm here to talk about opportunities for financial aid, hopefully to make things more accessible, affordable, and attainable. I am going to go ahead and stop my video only to help with bandwidth and such. And Financial Aid 101. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to talk about are the institutions that you should be considering, the types of financial aid that's out there, how the FAFSA is the key to this entire process, and as a result, the different federal and state programs that become available. My SSG stands for a couple of things, the portal that we created for students, as well as my Department of Michigan Student Scholarships and Grants. Of course, I'll talk about some scholarships, and then Q&A if you have any after. So institutions what institutions are you considering? My apologies. So essentially there's the main three, right? Community colleges, public colleges and universities, as well as private colleges and universities. So you'll notice in that first bullet point here, the average COA stands for cost of attendance. It's what they think is your student budget or the average cost for a student to attend there. So you'll notice that it essentially goes from 18,000, I'd round up to 19 for community colleges, all the way up to about 55, 56,000 per year. And this is assuming a 9-month academic year for a student. I would say that this would probably be cheaper if Jackson College didn't have its own housing. I believe it's the only one in the state of Michigan that has housing as a community college. And they offer associate, certificate, and licensing programs, pretty much anything that's 2 years and under. But in Michigan specifically, we have something known as the Michigan Transfer Agreement. So if you fulfill, I think it's around like 30 credits that are specifically those general education courses, then all schools that participate in the Michigan Transfer Agreement will accept and transfer those credits into their institution. So be sure to check that out so you can save money. Because if you go to your community college, take classes and credits, and then transfer those on, you're going to save more money, right? The average cost of attendance here includes tuition fees, room and board, books and supplies, transportation costs, if that's applicable to their student population. And so at your community or at your public colleges and universities, some of them do offer associate degrees, and that'll matter when I'm talking about some of our programs, because there are some programs that there's a time where we pay a certain amount of money based on you working on your certificate and associate's degree. Then there's a certain amount of money we'll offer when you're working on your bachelor's degree. And so when it comes to public universities, especially in the state of Michigan, you're going to find that you get a discount specifically as an in-state student. So for example, at the University of Michigan, for example, you would find that you would be paying maybe $14,000 or $15,000 per year for tuition and fees, but someone out of state would be paying roughly 3 times that. So about, what is that? $45,000 for tuition and fees. And that alone, everything else will be the same. Room and board, books and supplies, all those things will be constant and the same, but the only thing that's different is the tuition and fees. And then when private colleges and universities, the main difference is that you're actually all paying the same amount. Because they're private, there's no discount to you being a resident. So everyone's paying the same price no matter what. So then just this kind of graphic here that's talking about pretty much your average income and unemployment rate based on your educational level. And this is actually information offered by the Federal Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and it's as recent as 2020. So essentially what they found was that the more educated you are, the higher your education level, the higher average or weekly median income, and the higher your education, the lower your unemployment rate is. So then there's the types of financial aid. So when it comes to the different types, I like to break it down as free money, earned money, and borrowed money. Now, naturally, free money is the most attractive money. It's the money we don't have to pay back. And so scholarships are definitely that, as well as grants. Scholarships are sometimes merit-based, but not always. Some are academically based, and some are also athletically based, as we know. And so when we go to look for scholarships, I always tell students, think of who you are right now. If you are a sophomore or junior, look for scholarships relevant specifically to juniors in high school or sophomores in high school, because there are scholarships just for those students. And keep that mindset as you progress on, because when you're a freshman in college, there's scholarships for you. And then when you're a sophomore in college, there's scholarships for you as well. And then grants are those need-based opportunities. Those are going to specifically come from the FAFSA as well as the institutions themselves. Earned money is a form of work study, part-time employment that can help with college expenses. I actually talk about that a little later because it has its own slide. And then there's borrowed money, which are loans. Now, student loans are included in financial aid awards, which is why I'm talking about them. And so I want to make sure that I'm educating you on those as well. Loans do have to be repaid with interest. And when accepting or declining a student loan, it's important to consider whether or not you'll earn enough money after college to be able to pay off and manage that debt. And then there's 4 main sources of financial aid. The first source, of course, is the federal government, which is where the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, is coming in. There's the state government, which is where I hail from, and I'll talk about our opportunities. There's the institutions and colleges themselves, such as the universities. They often will have their own scholarship office or scholarship applications. And then there's private and third party associations, foundations, clubs, employers, churches, unions. So I often tell students to ask their parents whether or not their place of employment offers scholarships or not. Just because, for a personal example, when I was starting college, my parents had been working at their place of employment for 20 years. So long, before I was even thought of. And I did the same thing because the financial aid professionals suggested so. And one day my stepmom came home with a scholarship application and said she never knew that it existed. And even to this day, they don't really advertise or publicize it or anything. So it's good for you to always ask your employers. And then, like I said, anywhere you live, work, eat, or play, anywhere money is exchanged in your community, inquire about if there's opportunities for scholarships. And then there's that FAFSA I was talking about, the free application for federal student aid. So in order to complete this, you want to make sure you complete an FSA ID. So this is a username and password that you're registering for. There's one for the student that's required because they're going to use it all throughout college. And then one for the parent, because so that the parent can sign the FAFSA at the end for the student. This is linked to the student's social security number, name, and date of birth. And then when the parent creates their own, they're going to link it to their social security number, name, and date of birth. And so you have to have your own unique one. You cannot create a joint one, unfortunately. So you do need to have your own for recalling your information or resetting it. You do have to have your own email separate from your student, as well as you have to have your own phone number. So cell phone number, which I know students and parents alike have those. And then when it comes to starting your FAFSA, you're going to go to FAFSA.gov, and the student ideally should be the one that starts the FAFSA, because it's going to be asking a bit about information all about them. And so they can start out with using their FSA ID, logging in. It's going to import some of that information that it asked about to create the FSA ID. And then The student will fill in some of that information that it doesn't know, like which schools they're going to go to and what's their income, if they have any, what's their housing decisions going to be, and all that good stuff. And then if you do need support or help with this, especially if it's an evening or on the weekend, you'll notice here that the Federal Student Aid Office, their call center is open from 8 a.m. to midnight Eastern Standard Time, Saturdays 8 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Sundays noon to 6. And very easy phone number, 1-800-4-FED-AID. Or, if you prefer not to look at the phone and figure out what that is, it's 1-800-433-3243. And then some quick facts about the FAFSA. So it can be completed online, which is preferred. Be sure to avoid being scammed, because I don't know if you've heard me saying the acronym that it stands for the free application for federal student aid. So if anyone's trying to get you to pay for it, run in the other direction. Do not submit anything to them. It does have to be completed every year. Sometimes parents and students confuse this as a one and done application. But no, you actually have to complete it every single year you plan on going to school. And then for the state of Michigan, this year in particular, we have pushed our deadline for our state awards back to May 1st. For this year specifically, I think we did it last year as well. But this is only because of COVID and us coming out of the gloom of that, and recognizing that our students, especially as seniors this year, need a little extra time to make their decisions. So May 1st is the decision time this year, the cutoff. March 1st is what it normally is every year. And the FAFSA will even let you know that when it comes to state deadlines. If you were to put in Michigan, it'll say March 1st. For students graduating this year, you should have completed the 23-24 FAFSA if you haven't already. Please, please, please get on that, because money is first come, first serve. So if anybody's running out of money, that's going to be how they decide who gets the last dollar, is whoever completed it the earliest. That's literally how they make those decisions. And so juniors, you're going to be completing your FAFSA your senior year come this fall. Crazy to think, right? You're almost that done with school. But this fall of October 1st. So put a reminder in your phone and your calendars for October 1st. Let that be the day, or that you start getting ready, but make sure to try and complete it before the end of October. Because again, first come, first serve is how they make decisions on who's getting the last dollars of a fund. And then improvements have been made to the FAFSA to allow IRS data retrieval. The issue with that is just that you got to make sure your information matches 100%. And what I mean by that is, even though you put in your FSA ID and they've got that information from the Federal Student Aid Office, the IRS still makes you do some verification on their end to transfer your information over. So they're going to ask you, what was your last address when you last filed taxes? So if you might have moved since your last tax filing date, and let's say you just filed your taxes, you're going to use the most recent filed address, and it has to be written the same way you submitted it to the IRS. So if you live on 123 Main Street and you abbreviate street and put a period, or you spell street out, you've got to make sure you're that specific with how you filed, because they're assuming that if you're not typing it in the correct way, then you may be a hacker. Once you complete your FAFSA, you'll get this number, this output at the end called the estimated family contribution, also known as the EFC. This, even though it says estimated family contribution, it isn't the expected amount that your family would contribute. It's really just a number that schools use to determine how much financial aid your student's eligible for. And the variables that impact that the most are both parent and student income, family household size, the number in college, as well as the amount paid in taxes. Now, oftentimes, of course, I remember when I was younger and I felt this way, where I was like, I'm an independent student. I take care of myself. I pay for everything. I even had my own apartment at one point, living away from home and going to college. But unfortunately, things like that aren't really considered for dependency status. The government's really specific in looking at very unique situations where they're like, are you 24, married, with children, or have other dependents of your own, a graduate or professional student, meaning you're already working on your master's or doctorate program, a veteran, a member of the armed forces, experienced time in foster care, emancipated from your parents, or are a person without or at risk of being homeless or have some other unique situation that you feel would validate your ability to take care of yourself and make you independent when it comes to the FAFSA. So essentially, if you can't say yes to any of these situations, they consider you a dependent student, meaning that you need parental information on the FAFSA. If you end up saying yes to at least one of these, then you are considered an independent student. So then you might be wondering, what parents' information do I use? So if your parents are married to each other, naturally you're going to put both parents' information on the FAFSA, but you only need one parent to complete the FAFSA, okay? So pick the most patient parent or the most tech-savvy parent. Hopefully they're one and the same. And it makes the whole process super easy every year after year, because you will have to come and do this together year after year or however long you're in college. If your parents are legally divorced or separated, it's whoever is the custodial parent. If your parents are, or if, let's say you have just the one single parent and that parent gets remarried to a step parent, then you'll actually use both your parent and your step parent's income because they are lawfully married. And then if your parents were never married, not living together, naturally you're going to use the parent you live with that takes care of you. That's your custodial parent. If your parents were never married but are living together, in the eyes of everybody, they are married. Essentially, you're using both of their information. And again, just one parent has to create an FSA ID to complete this with you as the student. And then there are sometimes unique situations that happen, and you might be wondering, like, can I get that considered in my FAFSA? Well, there is something known as professional judgment. Professional judgment allows you to bring up a situation with the financial aid office at your college or university. It's not something that you can dispute on FAFSA or through FAFSA. They've designated that power to the college's financial aid office to make these decisions for them. And so some special circumstances that can be considered are a change in a household size, change in income, dependency status, but only due to family breakdown as a result of an unfortunate circumstance such as abuse or neglect, being at risk of being without housing, or as I mentioned earlier, some other circumstance that you feel would be relevant, but it does have to have official documentation. Unfortunately, the government doesn't see financial reliance, tax filing status, or where you're at during the academic year in terms of living with or away from your parents as a qualifying dependency override review. So they won't consider those things when looking at whether or not you're considered dependent or independent. And then assuming you get through all that, these are all the federal aid programs you'd be eligible for, or at least considered. I shouldn't say eligible, because this Iraq and Afghanistan service grant, I doubt most students have served over in Iraq or Afghanistan in order to earn that, but it's a grant that they put out there because they wanted to be able to help those who did. So the federal Pell Grant is the largest federal grant that exists. I will talk a little more detail about that. The Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, also known as FSEOG. Federal Work Study, I mentioned earlier, it's got its own slide, so I'll come back to that. There's the Teacher Education Assistance for Higher Education Grant, which is the TEACH grant for those thinking about being teachers. And then there's the Federal Direct Subsidized and Unsubsidized Loans, as well as the Federal Direct Plus Loan. So again, federal grants do not have to be repaid, but federal loan funds do need to be repaid. So the federal Pell Grant must complete a FAFSA to be considered for it. What we do know is that families making less than $27,000 automatically receive a 0 EFC, which means that their college-bound student would be eligible for the maximum Pell Grant. Currently, the maximum Pell Grant is the $68.95, and so that amount is assuming full-time, and it's assuming full-time between fall and winter semesters, split in half, and it'll be essentially prorated accordingly based on their enrollment. We bring this up to not to make you feel as though like, oh gosh, I'm not making that little, so I'm not going to be eligible, because even if you make more than this, you're going to be considered for it, and you can be eligible for an amount of Pell Grant even if you make over the 27,000 as a family. However, the main reason we bring this up is to show you that even the poorest of us, if you think about those costs of attendance at the very beginning and thinking about that 18 or 19,000 I had said for community college, it doesn't scratch that bucket much, does it? So I say that to say that, it's not that you'll be able to utilize one source to fund your entire education program, right? That quote unquote full ride. But that full ride can be created through the stacking of multiple resources and scholarships and grants in order to create that full ride for oneself. So the Federal Work Study Program, as I mentioned, is a part-time employment opportunity to help with college expenses. And this is a federal grant, actually, that shows up on a student's award letter. It doesn't unfortunately pay towards the student's balance, or it's not able to be an advance payment. The student essentially has to seek out employment on or off campus that falls into the work study parameters of that college or university. They have to find that job, apply for it, interview, get offered and accept it like any other job. But what they're allowed to do is use it towards any of their college expenses. So if they have remaining tuition fees or campus charges, housing or room and board charges, books and supplies that they need, or personal expenses, they're able to utilize that paycheck as they get it to pay what they need to towards their college costs. The other benefit is that this allows a student, when they're doing their FAFSA, they will mark it as income, but they'll put it in another area known as need-based employment, which will actually not count against them when they do the FAFSA. All right, so then there's federal student loans. Federal student loans, there are three kinds that you're gonna see: subsidized, unsubsidized. Subsidized, I like to say, is when the government is subbing in for you. And so they sub in terms of paying the interest while the student's enrolled at least half time. And once a student drops below halftime, graduates, essentially 6 months after they're no longer actively going in school, at least halftime, is when the interest will start to accumulate. If a student receives unsubsidized, then it's the opposite. The government is not subbing in for you, and therefore interest is accumulating during all periods. So the day it starts to pay towards something on the student account is the day interest starts to accumulate. And then if you go to a decently expensive school, you're going to see what are known as Parent Plus loans. So sub and unsub, the student is the holder of that loan. Plus a Parent Plus loan, the parent is the holder. The loan is in the parent's name and cannot be transferred to the student at a later time. Okay. So parents, if for some reason, because this is a credit base, they're going to pull your credit and look at it. And if you're not eligible for some reason, they will suggest getting a third-party cosigner. But you can actually forward that responsibility onto your student by saying what more can they borrow instead. They don't care who your cosigner is. It could be your neighbor. But if you are wanting to put more of the responsibility or skin in the game of your student, then you can decline getting a cosigner and allow your student to borrow a little more. But some factors I want you to consider when taking out a loan: make sure that your monthly loan payment doesn't exceed 10% of what your take-home pay will be after your first year after graduating. A good way to figure that out is by going to the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics website. That's bls.gov. And they will be able to tell you based on what you decide to study in school or what occupation you decide to get, and then even down to the state that you live in, what you could likely anticipate making. And so another way of thinking about what I just said with the 10% is making sure that your total loan debt doesn't exceed what you expect to make your first year after graduating. So if something says, the average income is about 60, while we want to be hopeful, guess a little less than that, just to be prepared, right? And so if you think you're going to make 45,000, let's say, for an annual salary, just make sure you don't borrow any more than 45,000, and don't use the higher number in terms of salary estimation, because it could come back to bite you, right? But with federal government loans, there are some positives. One of those positives being public service loan forgiveness. This is if you work for an approved nonprofit or government institution, After working there 10 years, you could be get loans forgiven. As a teacher, if you work in a high need area, you can also get some money forgiven. And then if for some reason, you end up miscalculating and thinking that you're going to earn 60K a year and you only end up earning 45, let's say, but you borrowed, right, over 60K in loans, then you can actually send in a copy of your pay stub or taxes to let the government know, hey, this is all I'm earning. And they'll actually adjust your payment to your income. So it's a more affordable payment. And then my Office of Student Scholarships, Grants, and Outreach, we appropriate over 220 million for 7 different, well, actually 8 now, different state programs, most of which for our need-based. They're specifically for undergraduate students who haven't yet earned their degrees yet. And of course, you can find program details, eligibility requirements, and fact sheets at our website there. So these are those different state of Michigan programs. So Children of Veterans Tuition Grant are for children of veterans who may have died or became disabled in the line of duty. They could get a tuition grant. Fostering Futures are for students who experience foster care in their youth, anytime after the age of 13. Michigan Competitive Scholarship requires a 1200 SAT score and goes to public universities, colleges, and universities. And you do have to have some established need per the FAFSA. The Michigan Tuition Grant is for those students that are going to a private college or university. This will allow you to, deal with some of that higher cost at the private or independent universities. Police officers and firefighter survivor tuition grant, similar to the Children's of Veterans. If your parent was a police officer or firefighter and passed away in the line of duty, you'd be eligible for a tuition grant. The Tuition Incentive Program, which is our largest program, I'll actually talk about that. Michigan Reconnect is actually for adults over the age of 25. So if there's any parents out there who don't yet have their certificate, associate, or bachelor's degree, we'd be happy to support you. And then Michigan Achievement Scholarship is a new scholarship that the governor came out with this past October that I'll actually share as well. But for all of our scholarships and grants, we do require the student maintain Michigan residency, be a U.S. citizen, permanent resident, or approved refugee status, complete that FAFSA, use it at an approved Michigan college or university, enroll at least half-time. As the parent that may be considering Reconnect, you can't be in default in any federal student loans. Or actually, no, that's for all the other ones, which as a student who hasn't even gone to college yet, you're not going to be. But with Reconnect, you can oddly enough be in default on a federal government loan and we'll still be able to pay you. Have a high school diploma, certificate of completion, or its recognized equivalent, and make sure you meet satisfactory academic progress institutional standards, which essentially is make sure you meet the GPA requirements of your classes. If you think you won't, talk to the professionals, such as your academic advisor and financial aid professionals, so you know the ramifications, and make sure you go to your classes and do not withdraw from them. I mentioned earlier that the FAFSA deadline is May 1st this year for our opportunities. However, going forward, they will be March 1st. And then, sorry about that. And then when it comes to college orders, you'll be able to update that via the FAFSA or update that via MISSG student portal, which I'll talk about here in just a moment regarding creating that. And then when it comes to also updating your college order, you could reach out to our customer care center at the 1-888-447-2687 number. So it's either updating your FAFSA's college order, going to your student portal and creating one and updating it there, or calling our customer service. And what we see in terms of where to send your money is going to be to your college, your first Michigan college listed on your FAFSA. So then there's the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, which is new as of this year for graduating seniors. Graduating seniors are eligible for this by simply completing their FAFSA and having an EFC of 25,000 or less. So if they decide to go to a Michigan community college, they'll receive up to $2,750 per year. If they decide to go to a public college or university, they'll get up to $5,500 per year. And then if they go to a private or independent college or university, they'll get up to $4,000 per year. And then there's the tuition incentive program, which I talked about is our largest state program. Students are eligible for this if they have had or currently have Michigan Medicaid coverage for 24 out of 36-month period between the ages of 9 and high school graduation. And these students are identified through the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and they send us a roster every November to let us know what students are eligible. There's no special application needed at all. The student simply has to graduate from high school prior to age 20. If they decide to go to a state-approved early or middle college, then they need to graduate before the age of 21. And then once they graduate, they have 4 years after high school to utilize their TIP benefits, which means make us pay for something, take a couple courses, at least 6 credits. And once they've done that, then their benefits will last up to 10 years from that first payment. There's 2 phases to TIP. First phase, I like to call your certificate and associate degree phase. And with this phase, it's all about that, you being enrolled in a certificate or associate degree program. The cost of tuition, if you're going for your first associate or certificate program, is full tuition coverage at your Michigan Community College. And we actually will pay now up to $450 in mandatory fees, and not the $250 listed here. That actually was just passed in our state Congress. And then if the student decides to go to a public university, again, they do have to be enrolled in at least a certificate or associate degree program. So if they're enrolled in a bachelor's degree, they'll only see phase 2, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. But if they're in an associate degree program, then we will pay the lower level resident rate, and again, up to $450 in mandatory fees per semester. So what that really means or translates to is that we'll pay full tuition those first couple years if you're in an associate degree program at a Michigan public university. And then if you go to a private or independent college or university, then we will pay the average in-district community college rate, which currently is $122 per credit, which will probably increase by the time students start in the fall. And then again, that $450 in mandatory fees per semester. But again, a certificate must be at least 24 semester credits in 1 academic year. And an academic year is measured by having at least 30 weeks of instructional time. So if a student does go to a public or private university, well, public university, and gets right into a bachelor's degree program, what they'll see is phase 2, and they won't see phase 2 until their junior year, where they'll get $500 per semester for those last remaining 2 years. And they have to complete those last 2 years within 30 months of utilizing or completing phase 1. And then MISSG is that student portal I mentioned earlier. So you can create a portal by going to michigan.gov/MISSG. Make sure to have your social security number handy. And then you need either a TIP record or a current FAFSA on file. So if the student is eligible for TIP, it will allow them to create this portal. If the student is not eligible for TIP, they will have to create a current year FAFSA in order for a portal to be eligible for them. In that portal, they can apply for these various scholarship opportunities or grant opportunities, receive communication from us regarding award eligibility, update the college on file, as I mentioned earlier, update their contact information, view eligibility and payment status, as well as email and communicate with us. If they were to go to our website, michigan.gov/MyStudentAid, click on that Students and Families tab, it'll give you a nice drop down where you can get to different publications, detailed program information, scholarship search tool, and scholarship search best practices, as well as signing up for our MISSG student portal. But by going to our website and going and checking out our scholarship search tool, this is what that looks like. And if you go there and click on our drop down, choose your county, it'll actually generate a PDF of active scholarships that we're aware of based on the county that you live in. And you can print that as well, or save it as a PDF in your computer so you always have the live links. But if you do have any questions, definitely give us a call, email us, or check us out on the web. but I also want to thank you for being here today and allowing me to present. I apologize for the minor noises in the background, but I thank you as a representative of my student aid, hoping to make college more accessible, affordable, and attainable for you.
Felicia, I have a question regarding the Michigan Achievement Scholarship.
Yeah, let's go back. I'll go back to
Those
it.
funds are available for students that have an income
Correct.
of 25,000 or less, correct?
No, it's the EFC on the FAFSA that needs to be at 25,000 or less.
Okay. And are these funds, do they require Pell Grant money to be applied before these funds are being applied? Or is this in addition to Pell Grant money at the same time?
It can be an addition too.
Okay.
Because I one good example, someone with a 0 EFC, they could definitely get Pell Grant and this to assist, as long as there's quote unquote room in their student budget that needs to be covered.
Okay.
But someone with a 25,000 EFC, for example, if someone did have that, or let's say 24,500, they wouldn't normally be eligible for a Pell Grant. So that person would, wouldn't have Pell, but they definitely still get this.
Okay. And then you just said that the funds have to cover some fee that is outstanding, meaning if everything is satisfied, then those funds can't be refunded to the student, can they?
No, not in this case.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
but that's a good question.
Good deal. Do you guys have any questions or comments that you want to make? All right, then, with that being said, then we will bring this session to a close. Thanks,
Okay.
Alicia. Excellent presentation as always. And we'll
Thank you.
all of you guys next time.
Yeah.
Everybody have a great day.
Take care, everyone.
That's really good to know that these funds could be utilized at the same time as Pell Grant. And it's also good to know that if everything has been satisfied, then they will not receive the additional money like they do in Pell Grant.
Right. Yeah. Because, the state, I think on some level, I was going to say, I don't know if we're still recording.
Well, I stopped.
But